What's up, Westeros, Hot D, Fire and Blood, Game of Thrones fan, whatever it may be? This is my third video, and this is a video I've been looking forward to probably the most recording. It's the Dance of the Dragons Geography Part 1. I'm going to do the Crownlands, the Stormlands, the Reach, the Westerlands, and the Riverlands in this video, just due to because those are where all the major battles take place, and it's more 50-50 in those areas, and the other areas are a little more clear cut. So as you can see, I do apologize for the slightly blurry Rhaenyra banner. I couldn't find an accurate one that I could get clear, so I do apologize. But you see Aegon on the left, Rhaenyra on the right, and you see the major houses supporting each one. You got the High Towers of Old Town, the Lannisters of Casterly Rock, Baratheons of Storm's End, versus the Velaryons of Driftmark, the Starks of Winterfell, the Arryns of the Vale. So let's get into the content. And before I get into the content, the sources you can find for what I used are down below. I used various internet resources, Fire and Blood, obviously, the Game of Thrones books, and then a Duncan Egg book series. This video will contain some season 2 and some potential season 3 spoilers. Season 2 will be a little more obvious. Season 3 spoilers will be me more guessing. And again, this will be post episode 2. So this is how I think the map will look like season 2, episode 2, at the end of episode 2, potentially maybe episode 1. But it seemed like a good point in time because the clearest cut in terms of who is on which side. And then after episode 4, the Dance of the Dragons, which we already know that's not a spoiler, we will see some larger shifts most likely in the map. I did my best with accuracy, but I had to make some assumptions, and you'll hear me say that throughout the video with certain houses that I'll explain. Some of the army sizes, for example, are based off of book numbers, internet research numbers, again, Fire and Blood, etc., etc. And again, the sources will be in the description below. Okay, so the video breakdown. This video will be comprised of a breakdown of each kingdom and the major houses within each of them. But again, just for reference, I will not talk about every single house in each kingdom. That is why the populations in the next few slides may not exactly add up to the total populations and or army sizes. I covered the most significant houses at the story in this time, meaning the houses that mattered most to the story. For example, like the Cargills. They're a small house in the Crown Lands, but the Cargills, Eric and Arik, they're a great example of. I use them, and the fun facts will mostly be centered around the Targaryen period. So with Aegon up to all the way to the Robert's Rebellion will be most of the fun facts about these houses, trying to stay consistent on the Targaryen theme here. But let's get into the next slide here, everyone, guys. So this is the actual content, so let's get into it. So first point, Aegon is essentially surrounded by all of his enemies. So going into episode 3, it is not looking good for the Greens. Maybe episode 2, it depends, is my prediction. You have northward, you have the Arryns, the Stuns, the Moons. You see the Arryns with the Falcon in the black area, and the Val, that's northward of the Green Dragon. Then if you go westward, you see Daemon's Red Dragon sigil with the Tully sigil and the Blackwoods and all in the Riverlands. If you go eastward, you'll see the Velaryons of Driftmark and the Targaryens of Dragonstone and all of Rhaenyra's eastern islands off in the Narrow Sea. All of those are on Team Rhaenyra's side at this point. And then if you go southward, you have the Bucklers of the Bronze Gate or the Fells of Felwood, which sided with Rhaenyra. So he is surrounded by all of his enemies, so it's not looking good. And additionally, more lords and houses sided with Rhaenyra than with Aegon. I took 1 point away from that, and I don't know if this might be too broad, but this says to me that the most lords of Westeros may be more loyal to their word than we think as a Song of Ice and Fire fans. I think oftentimes we think that a lot of lords are not very loyal, but I think this proves that over a 30-year period, they kept their word. I mean, even more than half of the houses in the Reach, for example, sided with Rhaenyra where the Greens thought they would be strongest. That's like a direct book quote. So, I mean, even the Reach is split 50-50. I've been kind of crapping on Aegon, so let's get into more pro-Aegon, anti-Rhaenyra here. Although more houses and lords sided with Rhaenyra overall, even at this point, Aegon has all the population centers. He has King's Landing, Old Town, Castle Rock, Lannisport, and he has money in the Iron Bank and Bravos. And I feel like I'm honestly, and he has the Arbor, which is another very wealthy area. So Aegon has all the population centers and wealthy Westeros. These cities sided with him at this point. And on top of there's no really wealthy city in the Stormlands that sided with Aegon, but the Stormlands are considered very fearsome warriors. So like they're not a very wealthy kingdom, but they're like badass warriors. The Blacks have like the Velaryons, but they're really their only significant source of wealth. But let's get into the each specific kingdoms and the breakdown of each specific kingdom. So the Crown Lands overview. Okay, so you got the map on the left. So you got a total population of about 2 million. You got a total army size, military size, about 35,000. Your largest city will be King's Landing, and your wealthiest city is Driftmark, but a close second is King's Landing. So Aegon is King's Landing and most of the northern Kingswood south of King's Landing. As you can see, he has all its territory with King's Landing. You can see his green and gold dragon there, and then probably the northern Kingswood as well. Maybe a few other small close by castles like Rosby and Stokeworth too. So I included that's why there's a little bit of green area. Rhaenyra has control of 80% of the land of the Crown Lands, while Aegon has control of about 55 to 60% of the population of the Crown Lands, and has slightly more soldiers. Once you get north of Stokeworth, you get into Brindlewood, home of the Cargills. You can assume from there northward and eastward in the Crown Lands is Rhaenyra's territory. Overall, in terms of who has the stronger army in the Crown Lands, it is a toss-up. Rhaenyra has more armies and houses and controls more of the land and the gullet at this point, thanks to Maelys, which we hear in Season 1, Episode 10. But Aegon has a lot more soldiers than he has King's Landing. King's Landing is a huge power base. But let's now get into the specific houses and their fun facts and why they joined each house. The Cargills, very small castle, but I had to include them. There's no direct reason they joined the Blacks, most likely because the surrounding houses chose Rhaenyra. And the fun fact, of course, is they had two twin brothers in the Kingsguard at the exact same time. And I apologize, I'm not even telling you where we're at. The Cargill sigil is the duck, the yellow duck with the red and black background. And then we're going to move northward to the Stawns of Rook's Rest. You can see they have a black and white checkered with a like a black double-headed eagle sigil. The Stawns have closer ties to Daemon and Rhaenyra's side. Um, It'll be the location of one of the biggest dragon battles in Westeros. You'll see that's where a Dance of the Dragons will happen, season 2, episode 4. That's not a spoiler. That's pretty much been released out to the public. And we'll move on to the Celtigars, moving eastward, or I should say rightward on this map. But you see them with the crab sigil. They have a smaller population, not a huge army, but they have very close ties with Viserys and Rhaenyra throughout this Viserys' reign. And Bartimaeus Celtigar will become the Master of Coin. And oh boy, I won't spoil anything too much here, but it'll be a little chaotic. And a fun fact for the Celtigar is they have a Valyrian steel axe instead of a Valyrian steel sword because they are also Valyrian people. And of course, you see Bartimaeus Celtigar a lot in episode 10 of season 1. The Velaryons of Driftmark, they have a massive population and they're a very wealthy city. So you see they can field about 10,000 soldiers. And of course, they joined the Blacks, Baela and Rhaena, marrying Luke and Jace. Well, now I think it's gonna be Luke or Jace and Joffrey. So they're gonna minor prediction. I think Joffrey is now going to be matched up with Rhaena. I think you're going to see them in the Val in season 2. That's a minor prediction. And of course, Daemon and Corlys's connection in the Stepstones, and then Rhaenys and Rhaenyra you see kind of grow closer in the last episode. And a fun fact is Aegon the Conqueror's mother was a Velaryon. Velaryons are the wealthiest house in Westeros currently, and they are the biggest financial contributors to Rhaenyra's cause with the biggest fleet in Westeros at this time. The Bar Emmons, they have the Marlin logo right below the seahorse logo of the Velaryons. It's the white background with the blue Marlin. They have close ties with Viserys and Rhaenyra. They're closer to Dragonstone. One of the first supporters of the Conquerors alongside the Celtigars and the Massies were the Bar Emmons, so they were one of the OG supporters of Aegon the Conqueror. And then you have the Targaryens of Dragonstone with Rhaenyra's sigil over it, with the Falcon of the Arryn, because her mom was an Arryn. Laenor, of course, her husband was the Velaryon, and then the double dragons is her sigil. It's pretty obvious why that is. So, and the Targaryens, fun fact, had control of the Dragonstone hundreds of years before the Doom even happened. So it was the furthest westernmost point of the Valyrian Empire. And a fun fact for the green Targaryens, the Aegon Targaryens, is with their massive population and their large, they can field about 20,000 soldiers. In the books, the sigil for Aegon is a black banner with a gold dragon. But in the show, it appears it will be a green banner with a gold dragon for Sunfire. Sunfire is also going to look sweet. I mean, we've all seen him in the trailers. All right, let's go into the next kingdom, the Stormlands. So the Stormlands, you can see, are led by the Baratheons with the stag in the center, the black stag with the yellow background. So they have a total population a little larger than the Crownlands. It's a pretty small kingdom, about 2.5 million. They have fearsome warriors with 35,000. Largest and wealthiest city we can assume is Storm's End. The Wiles of Rainhouse, I believe, are also a fairly wealthy house in the Stormlands. But overview of the kingdom: Rhaenyra controls the northern Stormlands at this point in the war. The Bronze Gate, Fellwood, and Haystack Hall, as you can see that black territory in the very north, right above the Baratheon sigil. My geographical theory here is the northern Stormlands went against their liege lord's side, in my opinion, due to the geographical regions of the mountains that block the Stormlands from the forests of Fellwood and Bronze Gate. So I think there actually is a geographical reason. And the northern Stormlands are so much, storm castles are so much closer to King's Landing, so they were probably just closer to Viserys during that time. There's a big kind of, you could almost argue, cultural difference too in the Stormlands with the Dornish marcher lords of like the Dondarrions, the Karens, the Swans in the South Stormlands versus the more northern lords who are closer to King's Landing in the forest, and they have way less to do with Dorne. But once you get south of Fellwood, so right below that black and green banner above, you can, it's all green territory: Storm's End, Tarth, Rainhouse, Mistwood, Stonehelm, Blackhaven, Nightsong. Aegon controls 80% of the land, people, and soldiers at this point, um, and then Rhaenyra the other 20. During this time, we may hear of an internal civil war within the Stormlands, like North versus South, in the show. It's a little unclear what is going on in the Stormlands at this point in the book. There are internal struggles in the Riverlands and Reach, so we can assume it'll be the same here, and we can assume this spoiler alert here: the Greens will eventually prevail in the Stormlands and crush the black Stormlords such as the Fells and the Bucklers, and Aegon will have a firm grip over this area, I would guess, by the end of season 2, because you'll see in season 3 that they Stormlords have to be united. That's my prediction. And the Stormlands are one of the only kingdoms without a major city, so they are not a very wealthy kingdom. However, they have very well-trained armies and strong militaries in general. Let's get into the specific houses. The Baratheons obviously chose the Grains for a marriage pact. You see that in episode 10. Plus, Boros does not like the idea of a woman ruling the realm. You kind of hear that in the book, and it kind of seems clear in the show as well. The Baratheon, I think the Baratheons have a really cool fun fact. And so the Baratheon family line started with Orys Baratheon, who is most likely Aegon the Conqueror's half brother, so a bastard of Aerion Targaryen, who was Aegon Conqueror's father. So the Baratheon line actually has Targaryen blood, and their famous black hair that Ned Stark says, black of hair, and everyone knows that line who's a Game of Thrones fan. In episode, I think it's like episode 6 of season 1 of Game of Thrones, comes from Aegon the Conqueror's mistress. So Orys Baratheon is probably a Targaryen, but he actually gets black hair from his mom's side. So that's where the famous Baratheon black hair comes from. Furthermore, Robert Renly and Stannis' grandmother is a Rhaelle Targaryen, the daughter of Aegon V. So this was part of the reason Robert had a stronger claim to the throne than Jon, Arryn, or Ned Stark during Robert's rebellion, because Robert's like 12% Targaryen. And let's move the right with the Tarths of Evanfall Hall. They have a pretty average population for this area. We all know Tarth because of Brienne, and it is said in the books that the Greens were scared that House Tarth would join the Blacks with the other eastern coast islands because of Daemon's influence. However, I'm assuming they followed their liege lords, the Baratheons, because it's not said otherwise, and teamed with the Greens. Fun fact about Tarth: Tarth is actually where the succession crisis started. So Tarth is where Prince Aemon, the father of Rhaenys, the original heir of Jaehaerys I, was shot by an arrow and died from a Dornichman in 92 AC. This was the starting point of the succession crisis that led to the Great Council of 101 AC. Moving down to the Wiles, they have the yellow background with the blue little squiggly thing. It rains a lot. Their house is the Wiles or Rain House. They have pretty average population, can field about 2,500 soldiers. And at this time, Jasper Wilds is one of the main Green supporters. He's the master of laws and plotted with Otto to install Aegon. The Wilds, again, are a wealthier house from this kingdom. And a fun fact about the Wilds is the Wild arms were spotted by Sir Duncan the Tall among the gathered heraldry at the tourney of Ashford Meadow in 209 AC. So Willem Wild was a member of Darren II Targaryen's Kingsguard. So this will happen about 90 years after this point. Aegon V and Dunk had just met, and actually Dunk, I don't think, had met Aegon yet, and Dunk sees the Wild banner, and Lord Sir Willem Wild is one of Darren II, who's considered one of the better Targaryen kings, Kingsguard. You got the Mertens of Mistwood. So there they have that owl sigil, the gray background, the white owl. They most likely sided with Team Green due to the Baratheons siding with them. And then Mistwood is buried deep inside the Rainwood. No other castles are like that south of the Neck. So there's no other castles south of the Neck. There's some in the north that are buried deep within a forest. So I thought that was kind of a cool fun fact about the Mertens of Mistwood. You got the Swans of Stonehelm. They have some pretty badass soldiers. They're considered a pretty strong military. And they sided again with Aegon, most likely due to Baratheon influence. Joanna Swan, for a fun fact, was captured by the Stepstone Pirates, as you hear Lady Redwine in episode 3 when they're gossiping with like Larys and Alicent. You hear that Lady Johanna Swan was captured by Stepstone Pirates. So we're going to move a little bit to the left, where you see the Swans of Stonehelm. You see the black and white swan. I already covered them. I'm sorry. We're going to move to the Dondarrions. The Dondarrions have a pretty sick sigil. They have the purple lightning with the white stars and the black background. Kristen's Cole-father was a steward of Lord Dondarrion, so they're definitely strong green supporters, the Dondarrions at this point. And again, like the Swans of Stonehelm and the Cairns of Nightsong, they're all pretty badass fighters because they're all Dornish Marcher lords, so they like have to be good at fighting. Barristan Selmy's house is also part of the Dornish Marching lords, so they're pretty much all badass fighters. And actually, a fun fact about the Dondarrions is they gave refuge to King Baelor the First Targaryen and Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight when they returned from Dorne via the Bone Way. So basically, Baelor the Blessed will be a really religious king that comes like 30 years later. He's the grandkid of Rhaenyra and Daemon, and he will like try and get his cousin back, who's from Dorne, and they go through Dorne and they rest basically at Nightsong because you can see it's on the way back from Dorne up to King's Landing. Finally, the Cairns, the surrounding area houses in the Stormlands and Reach were with Aegon. Of course, the Baratheon influence is most likely, again, why the Cairns of Nightsong joined. The Cairns have that yellow background with the small black birds. It's a little hard to see. It's in the far left corner over the green in the Stormlands, just north of Dorne. And the Cairns, again, alongside the Dondarrions, the Tarleys, the Peaks, are considered one of the main Dornish archers' houses, defending the realm against Dornish incursions, because again, Dorne is not part of the kingdom at this point in time. Let's go to the Black Houses. The Fells of Felwood. Again, all these houses have roughly the same, we can assume the same populations, except like Storm's End, and the same field about similar amounts of soldiers. So the Fells chose Rhaenyra from the show and in the book because they imprisoned the Lady of Felwood when she would not bend the knee to Aegon. But Sir Willis Fell will actually be one of Aegon II's Kingsguard in season 2. I think we'll see that. So that's kind of entertaining. I will have some quotes with the bucklers and fells in the Reach in the next section, so don't worry about that. Lord Buckler was executed in King's Landing for refusing to renounce his oaths to the Queen. And a fun fact about Bronzegate, Bronzegate is the northernmost house in the Stormlands right after you cross the Wendwater and the Kingswood. It's kind of considered the entrance to the Stormlands, and I kind of like to compare the Bronze Gate to the Bloody Gate, except the Bloody Gate's a little more intense, and the Bloody Gate's in the Vale, and it's like the entrance to the Vale of Arryn. So, the Eyrie. So it's kind of a similar comparison I think George is trying to make. And let's move to the Reach. All right, let's get into the Reach. So, as you can see, this is the Reach map. The Reach is the second biggest kingdom. So it starts with the Footleys up north with the black sigil with the white little stars in between the Aegon sigil of the green dragon, the yellow dragon, and the Tullys of the Stony Sept sigil with that fish. And then it goes all the way far as south with the Arbor with the grape sigil in the bottom left there. So in terms of population, army size, it's 65, 35%, I'd say, in terms of Aegon, but in terms of land, it's about 50-50. 7 greenhouses versus 9 black houses. The Greens have the Red Wine Flight and the High Tower Army in the western and eastern parts of the kingdom, more soldiers, higher population centers, and more overall wealth. The Black have all the north and the south central of the region. The Blacks have more houses, however, they have smaller, less powerful houses. The Tyrells, the Wardens of the South, decided to go neutral due to their kingdom being split apart. I'll have a quote from the book in Fire and Blood for you all a little later on in this section. So again, let's start with the Blacks of The Footleys of Tumbleton, so they have a pretty average population size, pretty average soldier size, like most of the Northern Reach lords. They sided with the blacks most likely due to their house around them siding with Rhaenyra, such as the Caswells. There is no direct reason for why the Footleys sided with the blacks, but it could be because they refused to bend the knee, like we saw with Lady Fell and Lord Buckler in episode 9. And again, for a bit of a spoiler and a bit of the fun fact here, you will see two massive and bloody battles at Tumbleton, most likely in season 3. You have the Merryweathers of Longtable. They're just below the Footleys of Tumbleton with that Thanksgiving-looking sigil. They're all about food. On page 432 in Fire and Blood, it reads, each man was given one final chance to swear his loyalty to his grace. Lord Hayford, Lord Merryweather, Lord Hart, Lord Buckler, Lord Caswell, and Lady Fell valued their sworn sword more than their lives and were beheaded each in turn. Fun fact for the Merryweathers, Owen Merryweather was one of the last Hand of the Kings to any Targaryen king, King Aerys II, the Mad King. The Caswells of Bitterbridge, again, pretty standard population, pretty standard military size. They're just left of Merryweathers or west of the Merryweathers of Longtable. They have the white backgrounded sigil with the golden yellow centaur shooting an arrow. In the show, it is very evident that Lord Caswell is a Rhaenyra supporter. You see it after she gives birth in episode 6 and throughout episode 9, and he eventually gets hung for it in the show. A battle at Stonebridge was one of the many battles during the Faith Militant uprising against King Maegor the First Targaryen in 42 AC. The savagery of that battle made the Mander run red with blood for 20 leagues. The bridge in that castle that commanded it was forever known as a bitter bridge thereafter. So basically, the Faith Militant rose up against Maegor the First Targaryen because he was an awful king and the Faith of the Seven hated him. I'm not going to get into too many details, but there was a brutal battle between him and his military and the zealots of the Faith Militant uprising at Bitterbridge, which was called Stonebridge, and it was so violent and bloody that they renamed the castle to Bitterbridge. We're going to move to the Rowans. They're just below the Caswells. They have the golden tree with the white background. They are in black territory. In Fire and Blood, page 430 reads, but elsewhere in the south, other lords were declaring for Rhaenyra. Amongst them, Lord Costane of Three Towers, Lord Mullendor of Uplands, Lord Tarley of Hornhill, Lord Rowan of Golden Grove, and Lord Grim of Greyshield. So we don't know the exact reason, like why the Rowans, Tarleys, Mullendors, well, we know the Beesberries, the Grims, etc., which I will talk about in the next few moments here, but we don't know the exact reason. We just know definitively that they did join the Blacks. During Aegon's conquest, Golden Grove was chosen as the point of rallyment for the King of the Rock, Loren the First Lannister, and the King of the Reach, Mern the Sixth Gardener. The Rowans were part of the 55,000 strong host assembled by the two kings and fought Aegon the Dragon in the battle known as the Field of Fire. So again, the combined armies at this point were much smaller than at this period. Like you're saying, the combined armies of the Westerlands and the Reach were 55,000, and at this time, I'm saying it's about 100,000. That's because at this, Aegon had conquered most of Aegon the Conqueror had conquered most of the Eastern Reach, so their army had been minimized, and just due to natural population growth over the course of 130 years, we can assume that the military would be much bigger. All right, we have the Tarleys of Hornhill, which is in black territory. They're right below the green and yellow flower sigil of the Tyrells. They have the red archer shooting with the green background, and they have a fairly large population of about 150,000 with 3,000 soldiers. They join the Blacks again from that page 430 Fire and Blood quote. And Tarleys tend to be loyal and true to their word, so it does not surprise me that they stayed with Team Black and stayed true to their word. And House Tarley is one of the few houses that has a Valyrian steel sword, Heartsbane. Moving down, we have the Mullendors of the Uplands. They are the butterfly sigil right below the Tarleys, the white background with the butterflies. Again, referring to that quote on page 430, the Mullendors join the Blacks. However, we do not know the exact reason as to why. And then in 55 AC, Lord Mullendor actually married Janice Templeton. It was considered an exceptional match for her and a triumph for Queen Alicent Targaryen. So a little fun fact around that. During the time of Alicent and Jaehaerys, Alicent Targaryen was Jaehaerys's, the old king's wife, probably the greatest Targaryen queen. She basically was trying to bring the kingdom together by setting up all these marriage matches from lords in the Westerlands to ladies in the Riverlands, et cetera, to bring the kingdom together, and it did seem to work pretty well, so good for her. We got the Beesberries of Honeyholt. They have a pretty average pretty small population, smaller castle. Lord Beesbury was murdered violently, as we all know, at the Green Council by Criston Cole, who was a huge friend of Viserys. And then on page 430, it reads, loudest amongst these traitors was Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Lyman's heir, who was demanding the release of his grandsire from the dungeon where most believed he was confined. So a lot of people think Lyman Beesbury is actually alive, just being confined, but he's definitely dead, and probably in the books we can also assume he's dead. And you will actually see a huge battle in season 3 at the Honeywine with one of my favorite characters, Darren the Daring. It's going to be probably a pretty cool battle. It'll definitely be a green win, but it'll be a cool battle. We have the Grims of Grey Shield, which is those 4 little islands. Those are the Shield Islands. We can assume that, even though it just says the Grims of Grey Shield went black, we're going to assume that the rest of the island, the houses on the islands, went Team Rhaenyra as well. That's why I highlighted them as black. They have a smaller population, but we do not know the exact reason. We just know that they joined the Blacks. And the Shield Islands are the first line of defense when the Ironborn try to sail up the Mander to sack the wealth of the Reach. So, like the Malisters of Seaguard, the Grims of Grey Shield defend their land against the Iron Islands because they're like the first line of defense. The Castains of Three Towers, they are that little black area in the far southwest, right below the High Tower sigil and right above the Arbor. They kind of have a cool sigil. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but um, they they joined the Blacks. We don't know the exact reason. We just know they did. And Eleanor Costain was one of the Black Brides, actually, of Maegor the Cruel. So Maegor the Cruel couldn't get any of his wives pregnant, so he started taking like 3 to 4 at a time, and she was one of them. It's probably because Maegor the Cruel. A lot of people think he was like made in basically like a magic lab by Visenya and wasn't actually like birthed naturally. But let's move to the greenhouses. So we have the Fossaways of Cider Hall, one of the bigger houses in the Reach. They have the big red apple sigil in that green area. They have 4,000 soldiers, 200,000. There's no direct reason from the books. They may give the reason in the show. I think they'll be in the show. The Fossaways are a pretty big house, but they are specified as one of the Reach Lords, not on Team Black. And actually owned Fossaway, Lord of the Cider Hill at this time, was a member of the Coltrips, a group of conspirators that wanted the Dragon Seeds, Ulf the White, and Hardhugh Hammer dead. So basically, there's going to be Ulf the White and Hardhugh Hammer are going to be introduced in season 2. I'm not going to get too into this, but Owen Fossaway will probably be part of that story. And actually, there's 2 Fossaway houses. Second one is going to be formed after the Ashford Meadow in 209 AC with Dunk and Egg. So you're actually, at this time, there's only one house Fossaway, but in about 100 years, there'll be 2, one with a green apple, one with a red apple. But let's move on to the peaks of Starpike. So the peaks are always causing trouble. They're kind of considered the more rebellious lords. They're always causing trouble with the Blackfire rebellions, which you're gonna hear about in 50 to 100 years after this. I'm not gonna get into like great detail about that because that's like really complicated like stuff. Alt Shift X on YouTube has a really good YouTube video on the Blackfire rebellions. I highly recommend watching it. He breaks it down in like 30 minutes more effectively than like almost anyone I think could. So I recommend that video. But the Peaks, they are one of the wealthier houses in the Reach at this point. They're a large house too. They most likely chose the Greens because it is the Peaks again, and they're always being rebellious troublemakers and going against their liege lords and kings. I mean, literally just look it up. Like you could just look up the Peaks they're just rebellious lords. And during the Dance of the Dragons, Lord Unwin Peak supported the Greens, it said in books. And he took command of the Green Army from the Reach after the Second Battle of Tumbleton and led its retreat. So, and a fun fact about the Peaks, Lord Gorman Peak was a fierce supporter of Daemon the First Blackfire and was considered one of the finest knights during the reign of King Daeron II Targaryen. All right, let's move to the Roxtons of the Ring. So the Roxtons, I'll admit it, I kind of messed up on this. So the Roxtons are all the way up top near the Westerlands border, near the fish sigil, as you can see in the top center. They have the blue background and the golden rings. They're a smaller house this time, but there will be a character from that house that's significant to the story in one of the battles. So there's no exact location. It's kind of on the Reach Westerlands border. It is said on page 451 of the book And Lord Costaigne was dying from a wound given by old John Roxton's Black Blade Orphan Maker. So the Roxtons will definitely be on Team Green because you can tell in this quote he's trying to kill Lord Costaigne, who's on Team Black. And we don't know the exact reason they chose Team Green. Fun fact about the Roxtons: Sir Lawrence Roxton was a victor in the War for the White Cloaks because there were 5 vacancies in the Kingsguard after young King Jaehaerys, first Targaryen, succeeded his uncle Maegor on the Iron Throne. Queen Regent Alyssa Valerian suggested that her son wore white cloaks to champions of the tourney, which would follow her golden wedding to Lord Rhaegar Baratheon. So he was one of the Roxtons, was one of Jaehaerys' Kingsguard. We are going to go to the Oak Hearts of Old Hoke, which have the yellow sigil in that big green area with the green little pines, the 3 green pines. And they're a pretty big house, 200,000, probably 6th, 7th largest house in the entire Reach. When Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen turned south in 112 AC, the son of Lord Oakhart unsuccessfully courted her. So you see that kind of in episode 4 when Rhaenyra is going to, trying to court a man. Lord Oakhart was one of the people she rejected, and this could be a reason as why the Oakharts joined the Greens. Sir Aerys Oakhart was named to the Kingsguard of Robert I Baratheon in 290 AC, so he was one of Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard. We have the black bars of Bandaline, which have the pretty simple sigil with the big black line and the white logo around it. They're a smaller house in the Reach. There's no direct reason as why they sided with Aegon. Could be because they just had a good relationship with the Hightowers. Lord Blackbar hosted at King Jaehaerys I Targaryen at Bandalon in 89 AC. His youngest daughter tried to seduce the king, but Jaehaerys rebuffed her. And again, their location is right in between the Hightowers and the Shield Islands with that black line going through. They're in clear green territory. Finally, we're at the High Towers of Old Town, which has a massive population of about 1 million people. It's probably the biggest city at this point in time. Old Town is about 1/4 of the wealth Aegon hid away for the Greens, and they are very wealthy on top of that. It is obvious as why the Hightower sided with the Greens. Cersei Hightower, the daughter of Lord Manfred Hightower, was wedded to Maegor the Cruel in 25 AC. More Maegor black brides. And then Maegor actually took a second bride in 39 AC, claiming that Cersei was infertile. So Cersei Hightower was his first wife. Finally, we're at the Red Wines of the Arbor. They have, again, a large population, can field a lot of soldiers, one of the wealthier houses in this area. The Arbor, like Old Town, is another very wealthy area. Part of it is due to the large wine production. They have like the best wine in Westeros. And on page 430 in Fire and Blood, it reads, House Hightower and Old Town were solidly behind King Aegon, and his grace had the Arbor too. So it's clear that the Greens sided with the Greens. Excuse me, the Arbor sided with the Greens. The Red Wines have a good close relationship with the Hightowers as well. And Olenna Tyrell was a red wine. So she's a red wine. And the neutral houses are the Tyrells of Highgarden, which I didn't even put on here, but they have a population of about 600,000 with 10,000 soldiers. They're the orange area with the green background and sigil and the yellow flower right in the center of the Reach. On page 430 in Fire and Blood, it reads, faced with such clamor from their own bannermen, the Castellan, the steward, and mother of young Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, acting as regents for the boy, suddenly thought better for their support for King Aegon and decided House Tyrell would take no part of this struggle. So they originally were going to go Team Aegon. They decided to just stay neutral because their kingdom is literally split 50-50. This is the most split kingdom, but let's move to the Westerlands, which is total green territory. So we have the Westerlands. We got a total population a little less than the Reach with 5.5 million. Total army size a little less than the Reach with about 55,000. The largest city is Lannisport, and the wealthiest city is Lannisport / Castle Rock, and the Golden Tooth is also very wealthy as well. So let's do the overview. The Lannisters are the second wealthiest house behind Driftmark during this period. The Hightowers of Old Town are probably the third. Aegon gave Casterly Rock 1/4 of his wealth at the beginning of the dance, and I will have a quote for that in this section. The population is around 5.5 million, and as well as large, loyal, and well-trained armies, around 55-ish thousand. Aegon has the entire region due to the Lannisters' firm grip over the Westerlands at this point. Jason and Tywin Lannister are firm Aegon supporters. From the show, it makes it pretty clear. Tywin was one of the major conspirators to lead to the Green Coup. And in the show, we get a clear reason as why Jason hates Rhaenyra. Rejection, classic. All right. So I'm for the greenhouses of the Westerlands. All the houses sided Aegon due to Lannister's firm grip over the Westerlands and loyalties to the Lannisters of the various houses at this point. So a lot of it is just they're all loyal to the Lannisters, and so they all sided with the Greens. Let's get into the Crake Halls of Crake Hall. Pretty large population. Again, the Westerlands is a fairly populated area due to its wealth. Crake Hall is where Aegon the Uncrowned and his sister wife, Rhaena, stayed when the Faith Militant Rebellion arose. Aegon the Uncrowned is the great great uncle of Aegon II and Rhaenyra. So he was the one that fought Maegor, and he eventually died. We got the Tarbecks. The Tarbecks are the one right above the Crake Hall. So the Crake Hall have the pig and the brown sigil. The Tarbecks have the blue and white star sigil right above them and right below the Lannister sigil. In either season 2 or season 3, you will see Adrian Tarbeck lead a Lannister host in the Dance of Dragons. So Adrian Tarbeck will be probably in the show. Finally, we're going to the Lannisters, which has a large population. About 1 million can field 20,000 soldiers. And on page 398 in Fire and Blood, it reads, Sir Tywin Lannister was named Master of Coin in place of the late Lord Beesbury and acted at once to seize the royal treasury. The crown's gold was divided into 4 parts. One part was entrusted to the Iron Bank of Bravos for safekeeping, another sent under strong guard to Casterly Rock, third to Old Town. So the actor that plays Jason and Tywin Lannister also played Sir Hugh of the Vale in Game of Thrones season 1. His name is Jefferson Hall. All right, the Farmans of Fair Castle. So Fair Castle is the boat sigil. It has red on the outside, then yellow, then blue with the 3 boats. It's that little island right west of the 2 lions. I do not want to spoil anything too hard in season 3. However, the show may show us the conflict between the Farmans and the Iron Islands during the dance. There will be another kind of internal conflict between the Iron Islands raiding the Westerlands. Like the Farmans have to really defend it because they're the only ones left in the Westerlands. And on page 98 and 99 in Fire and Blood, it reads, Dragons are not hidden so easily. Instead, the princess, Rhaena, took them both as far from Maegor as she could, Fair Isle, where Mark, and it's actually the Farmans of Fair Isle, Fair Castle, Fair Isle. It's kind of the same thing. Where Mark Farman granted her hospitality of Fair Castle with its tall white towers rising above the sunset sea. So basically, Rhaena Targaryen hides at Fair Castle for a long time, and Greenfire is at Fair Castle. Dreamfire's kind of been all around Westeros with Rhaena, but she's in the Westerlands a lot. Let's go to the Reigns of Castamere. So we all know that season 3, episode 9 of Game of Thrones. It's called the Reigns of Castamere. And it's about, I'll explain that fun fact in a second, but the Reigns of Castamere have the white background with the red dragon, so it's a similar logo to the Lannisters. And the song played at the Twins during the Red Wedding is called The Reigns of Castamere. The song originates from when Tywin Lannister crushed House Rhaen and Tarbeck in the Rhaen-Tarbeck Rebellion in 261, right before Aerys II became king and Tywin became Hand. So in 261 AC, when Tywin is 20 years old, the Rhaens and Tarbecks rose against the Lannisters, and he literally brutally murdered everyone in those families, and that's where the Reigns of Castamere comes from. The Marbrands I included because Lord Marbrand is one of Rhaenyra's Kingsguard. They are a smaller house. They have the flame, the tree right next to the 2 lions. It's like a tree on fire. They're a smaller house. They can only field about 1,000 soldiers. Even though Laurent Marbrand is Queensguard, the Marbrands chose to side with their liege lords. And a fun fact, Robb Stark took Ashmark when he invaded the Western Riverlands Westerlands in the second book, I believe, Clash of Kings, I think. And okay, we're going to the Westerlings, which we know Lord Westerling is a pretty significant character, a pretty significant Kingsguard in season 1. They have the sigil that is gold and white. It's like a gold background with, I don't exactly know what that is, like white seashells. Even though Lord Harold Westerling is not Team Green by any stretch of the imagination, the house sided with the Greens due to Lannister influence. Robb Stark married Jane Westerling, which eventually led to the Red Wedding. So that's who he broke the pact with the phrase. He actually married Jane Westerling, not what's her name in the show. Banefort. So the Banefort is that creepy. They're right above the Westerlings, and they're the furthest north house, as you can see in the Westerlands. They have that creepy black man, it's like I don't even know what that is. It looks like a ghost. I don't know. Someone can explain that to me. So the Baneforts are one of the main supporters of Tywin when he put down the Rain Tarback Rebellion in 261 AC. One of main supporters of Tywin. The Leffords of the Golden Tooth, which is the Golden Tooth sigil has that golden sun, the blue, partially blue background with the yellow triangle. They have a large. They can field 4,000 soldiers, have 300,000 people, and they're considered one of the most loyal houses to the Lannisters. They are a very wealthy house due to large gold production which the Lannisters gave them. And Lord Humphrey Lefford will eventually be the lead general for the Western Lords during the Dance of the Dragons, along with Fair Isle Princess Rhaena stayed at Golden Tooth with Dreamfire. So Dreamfire also stayed at the Golden Tooth. And again, Dreamfire we think is probably the parents of Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal. So we have the Sarats of Silverhill, which has the peacock. They again have a large population, can field 3,500 soldiers. They're considered another very wealthy family with close ties to the Lannisters. When Lord Tywin Lannister named his son Tyrion as acting hand of the king at the end of season one and the end of book one, Tyrion mentions Lord Sarat as an alternative over himself, actually. So, and then the Swifts, the last house. They have the Rooster, the Swifts of Cornfield. They have a smaller population. They're landed knights. Uh, is a knightly house from Cornfield in the Western Lands. And during the Dance of the Dragons, House Swift was apparently a full-fledged noble house. So by that time, they're actually a noble house. They started as a knightly house. And then Lord Swift fought for the Greens and died in the battle by the Lakeshore. I'm not going to get in the Battle of Lakeshore in the details, but he also defends the Greens and dies in that battle. Let's move to the Last Kingdom, the Riverlands. Okay, we're at the Last Kingdom, the Riverlands. You can see it'll start with furthest south point is the Fish, the Stony Step Tullys down there, and the furthest north is the Twins of the Freys with the blue twin tower, the bridge, and that is the Riverlands. It's all black at this point, but it's not all black. It's not going to be like that at the beginning of this episode one. There's going to be conflict in the Riverlands, and we kind of see that in the trailers with Daemon, but let's get into the overview. They have a total population of about 4 million, so smaller than the Reach or the Westerlands, but bigger than the Stormlands and the Crownlands. Their total army size, again, is about 40,000, and the largest city, or like castles, Harrenhal. Largest city is probably Maidenpool, which is the Redfish logo, or Riverrun. And the wealthiest cities is probably the Twins or Riverrun, and Harrenhal is a very wealthy castle just because it's a big castle and it's a lot of area. But the Riverlands will be heavily disputed at the beginning of season two. It'll be 80% black, 20% green at the beginning. But remember, I drew this map after episode two for my prediction. So at the beginning, it actually will be more green. You'll see a little bit more green in the center and a little bit more near the dragon and the fish sigils. But I didn't do that because Daemon's going to win. The only significant Riverlands houses that declare for the Greens at the very beginning of the war, so this will be at the beginning of season two, I didn't even include them here, so listen, is the Tullys, I'll explain more later, the Brackens and the Vances of Atrana, and ironically, the Vances of Atrana have a 2 green dragons on their sigil. I wonder if it comes actually from this period. So you will see Daemon go to Harrenhal during episode 1, where you will see him take it from the Greens, Lord Simon Strong, the uncle of Larys, and rally the Black Trident Lords there. And Alice Rivers time. I'm not going to get into Alice Rivers because that's a lot, but Alice Rivers will be a pretty significant character at Harrenhal in season 2. You'll see the Bracken Blackwood rivalry like we saw in season 1, episode 4 of Hot D. The show will heavily emphasize that, which I like because that is probably the most significant rivalry. I only have the Blackwoods on here, and you'll see why, because they win. The Blackwoods and Daemon will win that dispute and crush the Green Uprising by the end of episode 1, is my prediction. And Riverrun will originally declare for Aegon when the old Lord Grover is alive at the very beginning of the war, but his grandson Elmo, which is, and his great grandson Kermit sided with Rhaenyra and the Blacks, though, because they were like, the Blacks are going to win. Well, they thought that. But let's get into specific houses. We have Daemon at Harrenhal. So I put Daemon, the Strongs of Harrenhal, because it's kind of confusing. I didn't want to just do the Strongs because Daemon kind of just dominates that area. So again, Harrenhal is a pretty large population. It's in the center of the continent, 250,000 with 3,500 soldiers with some gold cloak support. So there's probably a little more soldiers. On page 412 in Fire and Blood, it reads, with its lord Larys Strong away in King's Landing, the castle was but lightly garrisoned. Having no wish to suffer the fate of Black Heron, its elderly Castilian Sir Simon Strong, uncle to Lord Lionel Strong, was quick to strike its banners when Caraxes lighted atop King's Pyre Tower. Then on page 413 in Fire and Blood it reads, when Prince Daemon sent forth his call to arms, they rose up all along the rivers, knights and men-at-arms, and humble peasants who yet remembered the realm's delight, so beloved of her father, and the way she smiled and charmed them as she made her progress through the riverlands in her youth. So Daemon will rally the loyal lords to Rhaenyra to Harrenhal in episode 1, and Harrenhal is the largest castle in and is essentially in the center of the continent. And again, I said you will meet Alice Rivers and Simon Strong when this occurs. But let's get to the second house, the Pipers of Pink Maiden. Fairly large population, average army size, and on page 414 it reads, Peter Piper, the grizzled lord of Pink Maiden, spoke for many when he said, I swore her my sword. I'm older now, but not so old that I've forgotten the words I said, and it happens, I still have that sword. So the Piper sided with the blacks for pure loyalty purposes. And then Melanie Piper, for a fun fact, was a favorite of the young Princess Rhaena Targaryen. When Prince Aegon Targaryen rose against Maegor Targaryen, the hosts of Aegon and the Rhaena gathered at Pink Maiden Castle, the home of Melanie's brother, Lord John Piper. Melanie was killed in the battle beneath the God's Eye in 43 AC. Rhaena and her dragon Dreamfire briefly stayed at Pink Maiden. So again, Dreamfire's been all over, and Pink Maiden is another big castle where there were wars between Aegon the Uncrowned and Maegor in about 100 years before this. We have the Tullys of Riverrun, so a large population can field a lot of soldiers. And on page 414 in Fire and Blood, it reads, the Lord Paramount of the Trident, Grover Tully, had been an old man, even at the Great Council of 101 AC, where he spoke for Prince Viserys. Though now fallen, he was no less stubborn. He had favored the rights of the male claimant in 101 AC, and the years did not change his views. Lord Grover insisted Riverrun would fight for young King Aegon, yet no such word went forth. The old lord was bedridden and would not live much longer. I would sooner the rest of us not die with him, declared Sir Elmo Tully, his grandson. Riverrun had no defense against dragonfire, he pointed out to his sons, and both sides ride dragons. So they basically were just like, yeah, this guy, we're going to side with Team Black because it just seems more logical. Daemon's dominating the Riverlands. This old man, we're not going to let him dictate it. He's going to die anyways. So Riverrun at that point was neutral, but by the end of episode 2, it will be clear there with the Blacks. Tullys, like Targaryens or Lannisters, have defined traits as well. So this is the fun fact. Members of House Tully tend to have fair skin, red-brown, i.e. auburn hair, and blue eyes in a variety of shades. You see that with Sansa, and you see that with Catelyn. We're going to go to the Blackwoods of Raventree Hall. Okay, so they're significant, all right? They're going to be significant in Season 2 and probably Season 3. So, the Blackwoods. In the Riverlands, raiders out of Raventree flying Rhaenyra's banners crossed into the lands of House Bracken, burning crops, driving off sheep and cattle, sacking villages, and despoiling it of every sept where they came upon. The Blackwoods were one of the last houses south of the Neck who still followed the old gods. And then continuing to page 429, it reads, many other grievous lords were suffered by both sides in what became known as the Battle of the Burning Mill, which you're going to see probably in episode 1. Under the command of Sir Amos' bastard half-brother, Sir Ryland Rivers, it was only to find that Stonehenge had been taken in their absence. Led by Prince Daemon on Caraxes, strong host made up of Derrys, Roots, Pipers, and Freys had captured the castle by storm. So the Blackwood-Bracken rivalry will continue when Aegon IV, the grandson of Daemon and Rhaenyra, though through their son Viserys, will have a bastard with a Blackwood and a bastard with a Bracken. The Blackwood bastard will become Brynden Rivers and the Three-Eyed Raven, and the Bracken bastard is Bittersteel Aegor Rivers. This, with not all of the detail, will spiral into what we know as Blackfyre Rebellion. Barbara Bracken and Melissa Blackwood are the mothers of the bastards who hook up with Aegon IV and basically start the Blackfyre Rebellion. So yeah, they're a big deal later on too. But basically the Brackens and Blackwoods, and by the way, the Blackwood sigil is the one in the center. It's the red background with the white tree and the black ravens. So that's where we're at right now. But anyways, we'll go up to the Malisters. The Malisters have the purple sigil with the eagle, and the Malisters tend to be loyal and true to their word and sided with the Blacks, so it doesn't surprise me they sided with the Blacks. Seaguard is a fortress built to defend the coast against the Reavers from the Iron Islands and dates before even Aegon's conquest. So like the Grimms of Grey Shield and Reach, the Malisters of Seaguard defend against the Ironborn attacks. Let's go into the Freys. The Freys have the gray background with the two pillars and the bridge. The Freys are the twins. They have a large population. They're a very wealthy castle at this point, and they're not considered the most loyal of houses, but they did side with the blacks. Refer to page 429 quote. There's no direct reason why they did. The Freys are just a very wealthy house due to their location. The twins is the bridge that separates the north from the south. And the Freys also have a rivalry with the Reeds of Greywater Watch in the north, or at least they do not like each other. And the Freys are one of the most northernmost houses in the south, so it's basically as far north as you get south of the neck. We'll go into the dairies of Derry. So they have a pretty average population. Again, referring to the quote on page 429, the Derrys sided with the blacks, but there is no direct reason as to why. Castle Derry is going to be one of the castles that Aemond will go on a burning spree with Vhagar, total Visenya vibes, and you'll see that most likely in season 3, but that'll be a castle that's burned. The Mootons, which is the red fish and the white background, the Mootons have, there's no direct reason the Mootons sided with the Blacks, most likely due to Daemon's influence at Harrenhal, or they just swore to honor Viserys' word 25 years prior. Lord Wallace Mooton will most likely appear in season 2 after the Battle of Rook's Rest on page 453 and 454 in Fire and Blood. It reads, Lord Wallace Mooton led 100 knights out of Maidenpool to join with the half-wild crabs and Bruins of Cracow Point and the Celtigars of Claw Isle. Through piney woods and mist-shrouded hills, they hastened to Rook's Rest, where their sudden appearance took the garrison by surprise. After retaking the castle, Lord Mooton led his bravest men to the Field of Ashes west of the castle to put an end to the dragon's sunfire. Then it continues. Mooton's men swarmed him with swords and spears and axes, dealing him many grievous wounds, yet each blow enraged him further. Amongst them slain was Lord Wallace Mooton, Lord of Maidenpool. After Rook's Rest, Aegon and Sunfire will be severely wounded, so Aegon will be shipped back to King's Landing to heal, and Sunfire was being guarded by a garrison at Rook's Rest where he was healing. During this time, I've predicted in prior videos that Aegon and Sunfire will have a telekinetic connection like Rhaenyra and Syrax had in season 1, episode 10. I think you're going to see that because they're both like going to be hurt and like healing. And basically the plan, Lord Wallace Mooton wanted to kill Sunfire at Rook's Rest while he was healing and vulnerable, but that didn't work too well. Yep. Now let's move on to the Woads of Harrenhal. So the Woads, they are a house of landed knights sworn to the Wents. Their house location is near So's Horn in Harrenhal. I included them because you may see them at the beginning of season 3 against Criston Cole. They sided with the Blacks as well as most likely sided due to Daemon conquering Harrenhal or for pure loyalty purposes. On page 461 in Fire and Blood, it reads, Meanwhile, muddy roads and rainstorms slowed the pace of Aemond's advance, for his host was made up of largely of foot, with a long baggage train. Sir Criston's vanguard fought and won a short, sharp battle against Sir Oswald Woad and the lords Derry and Root on their lakeshore, but met no other opposition. This quote is referring to after the Battle of Rook's Rest. Criston and Aemond will march westward to recapture Harrenhal from Daemon. And finally, we have the Tullys of Stony Sept. I included the Stony Sept due to its significance and it being the center of the continent. At this time, we can assume the Tullys have control over the Stony Sept, implying that its people and soldiers sided with the Blacks. And a fun fact about Stony Sept, during Robert's Rebellion, Lord Robert Baratheon was wounded in the Battle of Ashford and sheltered in Stony Sept, hiding from a royal army led by Lord John Cunnington, hand of the king to Aerys II Targaryen. John's men searched from house to house, and hostages were hung in crow cages, but the townsfolk moved Robert from one hiding place to another, including the Peach. When Robert's allies, Lord Eddard Stark and Hoster Tully, arrived at Stony Sept, Robert defeated John in the Battle of Bells, forcing the Hand to retreat. After the battle, Sir Barristan Selmy and Sir Jonathan Derry rode to Stony Sept to rally the surviving royalists. So that'll be a significant place in Robert's rebellion. That's all I have for part 1. So I know that was a lot, guys, and I appreciate it if you watched it. Hopefully you got something out of it. I'm gonna be working on part 2, but to be honest, part 2 will probably be a little bit more boring because the Eyrie and the North are pretty clear-cut black, and for Rhaenyra, and the Iron Islands will also side with Rhaenyra as well, and Dorne is just neutral because Dorne's not even part of the Seven Kingdoms at this time. But I will have that second video out. It will be much shorter than this one, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. So thanks, everyone.